So, good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Did everyone have a nice Easter break? Anyone have any stories they want to share from their Easter holiday? Some travel adventures, something like that. Any questions about courseworks 1, 2, or 3? Before we start. Okay, well, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt or comments. Otherwise, we're going to talk about citing research, a little bit about plagiarism, and this is important for courseworks 2 and especially 3, right? This idea of citing research and plagiarism. I'm going to try to move a little bit quickly through this because I think it's all material that, well, a lot of you know it already, or hopefully you know it already, but somebody has to cover this material and make sure that you know it. But I think it's easy to understand, so I'm going to hopefully move through it swiftly. Yeah. It's not profound or anything like that. It doesn't take a lot of brain power. So we're going to talk about making use of citations in order, with a special focus on avoiding plagiarism, right? Maybe using quotes or using summaries of previous work or using images from previous work like diagrams, libraries, or technology, and trying to give some guidance on when citations are appropriate and how to put a citation in a bibliography, avoiding plagiarism, and so on. And you'll notice in coursework 3, there is a tool that you have to use called Service. You might remember that. We mentioned that already in a lecture a long time ago. So that's like putting, some tool that helps you manage your references. Right? So plagiarism is something you want to avoid, right? Trying to sell or present somebody else's work as your own. That's kind of the rough definition of plagiarism. Submitting someone else's work as your own, copying words or ideas without providing credits of where you got them. Forgetting quote marks around quotations, lying about the sources of a quotation, copying and slightly editing someone else's text, copying paragraphs or programs from a textbook or web page, copying another person's work either with or without their knowledge, working together in groups of 2 or more to produce a single program or essay, and then each member of the group submitting a copy of this as their own work without acknowledging the other team members. Getting someone else to do all of your work and then submitting it as your own work, whether you pay them or not. So the University of Nottingham has documentation and a policy, a well-documented policy on plagiarism and referencing and citations, and there's a link to it here. I guess everybody's familiar with this, right? I have my own sort of stories and encounters with plagiarism. Maybe I'll tell one of them if there's time. At the end, I can tell a story about plagiarism. So the University of Nottingham definition: representing another person's work or ideas as one's own. For example, by failing to correctly acknowledge others' ideas and work as sources of information in an assignment and neglecting the use of quotation marks. This also applies to the use of graphical material calculations, in that plagiarism is not limited to text-based sources. So in order to avoid plagiarism, citations are a very good way to do that. Right? Why do we talk so much about citations? For responsibility, right? Propriety and professionalism, it is socially and morally responsible to give people credit for their ideas. It might be backed up formally by intellectual property laws, so some of these things are like legal, enforced by law, like copyright and patents, right? For accuracy, right, by giving a direct quotation, we ensure that the original author's words are not misinterpreted or distorted, or at least there's some attempt in this direction. By citing where ideas come from, either through direct or indirect quotation, we make history of a topic clear and who made which arguments. So we increase our accuracy using through citations. We also provide the reader with where we got our information in case they want to follow up and read more. Like if you get some information somewhere, you want to tell the reader where you got it, so that if they want to check the source and read about the topic in more depth, they can. Or they can answer the question, where did you get your information from, right? If an idea or quotation seems interesting, a reader can read the original book paper to find out more. Particularly for students, to provide clear evidence of which ideas are your own and which are not, basically, right? There is a fifth reason, too. There are more reasons than just 4 about why we use citations. Can anybody think of any other reasons? No? Nobody can think of any reasons why we might use citations? Everybody's too scared?
To prove our points, where they are taken from. Citations.
What's your name? So can you repeat your answer?
So you're talking about citations, right?
Yeah, why we would use them.
To prove our points, like where it was taken from, and it's not just what we sort of created or invented.
That's a very good point. It wasn't what I was thinking, but it's very good. So if you have an opinion and you want to support it with evidence, you can use citations, right? I'm not just making this up. There are other people that believe have the same view. Or I'm supporting my view with evidence, right? That's a good reason. And that is related to another reason which I was thinking, which it makes you look smart, right? The more you use citations, the more smart you look. You look more intelligent because you are more intelligent, right? You've done your research, you've done your homework. When you read things, your intelligence generally increases. And using citations is some evidence that you've done some reading and you're more educated in this area, right? So you look smarter.
So one question, please.
Yep.
So during my pre-masters and bachelors, I've been taught that every opinion must be supported with certain citations, right? But I think that this requirement is not fully suitable for computer science because while working, we explore some sort of things. So my question is it okay to share our findings, our sort of explorations, but without any citation? Imagine a situation when you explored something, but no one wrote about it, right? Is it okay?
Yeah, it's okay. I guess in that case, you would want to describe the attempt that you made to find out if this is really new. Like, I have this opinion, I believe it's brand new, but you want to support that idea with some evidence. Like, I looked for this idea in the following sources, in the following places, and I couldn't find anything, if you know what I mean. So you want to give a description of where you looked to support your idea that your idea is actually new, if you know what I mean. Because if you didn't check if your idea is new, then it's going to be hard to believe. You know what I mean? There are some very general rules of thumb about plagiarism and citations, like when to use them. Does anybody have any general rules of thumb that they learned in school? Because I think you've all seen this before, this topic. I learned it in school. I learned it in high school as a first-year student in high school. I don't know about you guys. Some general rules of thumb about citations, when to use them, and how to avoid plagiarism.
Not just copy those statements and paste them in your work, but to paraphrasing them in a way that you're like explaining that statement. For example, there's one statement in someone's work, and what you're saying, according to this person's work, he mentioned that this is going to be this, right? But not just instead of just copying and pasting it, and this is what he said. And eventually, the plagiarism checker will find a lot of plagiarism. That work, right? This is what you mean?
That's a very, very long rule of thumb. Rules of thumb are just very short, concise recommendations that are easy to remember. So one rule of thumb I learned when I was 13, I don't know about you guys, I don't know if you ever learned this or given some rules of thumb. If you use any numbers, you need to provide a citation. Where did you get your number from? Right? Whenever you use a number, you need to provide a citation, because your numbers have to come from somewhere, right? So that's one rule of thumb. To avoid plagiarism, you need to never use the same 3 words in a row from another source. So if you use 3 words in a row or more, then you need to cite your source, basically. Right? Those are 2 rules of thumb that I learned when I was, 13 or whatever, that they taught us in school. And they're good rules of thumb. I still use them today. And I still look at other people's work and I apply those rules. It's important to put your work into context of a scientific or technical research, literature, and current technologies. So this could mean that demonstrating your idea is new. If your idea is new, you would at least discuss related ideas, right? Providing evidence that your approach is promising, contrasting what you have done with previous work to show how it is new, providing the reader with the ability to find out more about a technique, explaining where a data set came from. So we had a special lecture on how to find previous papers, right? So now we explain how to quote from them, summarize them. We already learned how to summarize them and cite them in coursework 1, right? And this is going to be relevant again in courseworks 2 and 3. So one way you can cite previous work is through direct quotations. I think everybody's familiar with this. You can take a sentence or a paragraph for some previous work, put it in quotes, and then cite that as part of your literature review, for example. A direct quotation needs 4 components: the quote itself, right? The quotation marks, an in-text citation directly after the quotes, and then a full reference in the bibliography and reference list. Right? That's generally true. These 2 are always true. They're always necessary, right? Here are some just short examples of direct quotations, right? Here's the quote, here's the reference, right? Here's another quote, here's another reference. Sometimes quotes are longer, so they're put in their own paragraph, right? And here we have the reference in the page number, which is very helpful, right? In this case, we're given a page number, which is very nice. Do you need to quote directly? Often you don't need to quote directly, right? You have to use your own judgment as to when you want to use direct quotes and when you don't want to use direct quotes. Sometimes you want to summarize instead of quoting. There's another rule of thumb about this. When you want to summarize some other text but you don't want to plagiarize it, a nice approach of doing this is to read the text. Maybe you want to summarize a paragraph or a page. You can read the paragraph or the page and then you put it to the side, put it out of sight so you can't see it anymore, and then you immediately try to summarize it from memory, right? That will prevent you from plagiarizing, right? But you still have to cite it. But that's a way of summarizing without plagiarizing, if that makes any sense. That's a nice rule of thumb as well. I didn't learn that in school. I kind of thought of that myself. So here's some examples, right? Local search technologies have a long history of mathematics and computer science, or Russell and Norvig describe different versions of a local search used for many years in mathematics and computer science. So some reasons to quote directly: if you want to give a very accurate definition. Definitions are very often quoted. They're probably the most quoted material. Is when you have a definition that you want to take from somewhere. Maybe the author uses very precise language, and that language is very difficult to summarize without changing its meaning. That's a common scenario. And it's the same thing. The original quotation uses specialized language that would be lost in a summary or might be changed in a summary. Right, so here's an example of that. It resembles trying to find the top of Mount Everest in thick fog while suffering from amnesia. That's a difficult quote to summarize in other words. So in this case, it makes sense to just quote it directly. We often use diagrams, images, and other technologies from other places, especially in visualization, right? Visualization, we use a lot of images from other sources. You can include the phrase taken from in the caption plus the in-text citation, or adapted from if you have made changes to it, right? And here's an example of a caption. The original figure is taken from, Cui et al. 2012, figure 3. Right? That's a very common scenario. For software libraries, the usual best way is to give a reference to the website or GitHub link, right? The Natural Language Toolkit is a very popular library to cite, very popular, or the MQTT library. Similarly, for hardware, you can provide citations for special pieces of hardware, right, like Raspberry Pi and so on. When do you not need a citation? It's always best to put in citations if you're not sure, right? You can never go wrong by putting in an extra citation or something like that. You don't need to cite something if it's common knowledge or generally accepted. This depends on the audience you're writing for. So in a computer science dissertation or paper, you wouldn't need to put in a reference if you mention the Python programming language, right? Might not be necessary because it's common knowledge. But if it's something, if it was for a set of school kids at age 10, you might put a reference in for Python programming language, right? If it's the sort of thing your audience would uncontroversially know, then you don't need a citation, like smoking is bad for your health, right? Or most people use mobile phones. It could happen that you're continuing to discuss the same idea over a few paragraphs. You don't need to repeat a citation every single sentence, maybe once for each paragraph, for example. And then in the case of your own original ideas and interpretations. But if your idea is inspired by another source, then cite that source. Usually the ideas have some inspiration, right? Usually they occur for some reason and they're inspired by some event or some piece of literature. There are different styles for citations, right? Using numbers, for example. Everything that is cited in the text must be in the bibliography. So this is an example of a bibliography. It's the list of references, right, that provide all the sources of your citations. And everything that's in the bibliography should be cited in the main text, right? So in-text citation is usually a surname and a number, or a surname and the year of publication. Those are the two most common styles. And there are many different styles of referencing and citations. So one of the most common is the Harvard style, which is the surname of the first author here, and then the year of the publication. This is a very common referencing style, and you see that in the courseworks, right? You see this referencing style being used, right? And in the slides. And there are a lot of examples where numbers are used for the citations, right, as another style. Those are the two main styles that are prevalent and that I use, generally speaking. So when you cite a conference paper, you need to provide the list of authors, the year of publication, the title, where it was published, the name of the conference, the publisher, the pages, and the date and location and DOI. So here's an example, right, of a conference paper citation. When you cite a journal paper, you need to provide the author names, the year, the title, the article title, the journal name, the volume, the issue, pages, publishers, and month. So here's an example of a journal citation, right? It has the author list, the title of the paper, the name of the journal, the volume number, the issue number, the pages, and the year and the DOI. We will be assessing you on this, by the way. You will lose points if you do not have complete references and citations in your coursework. So you will be assessed on that. We'll be looking at it. And a piece of feedback that I often give is references are incomplete or erroneous, you know, and deduct points. It's very, very common, very common. Books or book chapters. So for books or book chapters, again, we provide the authors, the year of publication, the title of the book chapter, and the publisher, and an ISBN number or DOI. This is an example of a citation for a book. This is a citation of a book chapter, right? So it has the name of the chapter, and then the name of the book, the editors, the year of publication, the pages, and so on. And a URL, right? For a URL, we provide the page title, the author, the URL, and the last access date, right? When we want to cite web pages. And when you collect your references, you generally want to use some piece of software to collect your references and manage them, right? Generally speaking. You can use EndNote, right, which is one reference manager. You can use BibTeX, which is another reference manager. And there are probably other ones. Serviz is one that you'll be asked to use in coursework 3. Right, it's a kind of reference manager, but it's very visual, right? And it lets the users of your literature review explore your references, actually, and it provides information about your references. So when you submit a piece of work such as your dissertation, you are providing evidence to the university that you created your work presented in the dissertation as your own unaided work. So you're going to use lots of citations. By the way, we're hoping that your coursework 3 overlaps directly with your dissertation. So one of the goals of coursework 3 is to actually start your dissertation. So chapter 2 of all dissertations is the literature review, right? That's chapter 2 of every single dissertation. Chapter 1 is the introduction and motivation. Chapter 2 is the literature review. And hopefully, you're starting your literature review for your dissertation. It's not required that they overlap, but we're hoping they overlap, right? To increase the quality of your dissertation. What's important is that we know what is your original work and what is taken from elsewhere, right? By taking care with quotations and citations, you can give us evidence that we need to know what work is yours and what work has been done previously. And then there's this whole business about ChatGPT and the other chatbots and generative AI. Can you use those? So the university has a policy on this, right? This is probably most of you have seen this, but you can Google like University of Nottingham policy on ChatGPT and find out more. But this is the official university policy. The University of Nottingham currently equates the use of AI tools with plagiarism unless explicit permission for their use has been granted by a student, school, or department. Unauthorized and or unacknowledged use of ChatGPT or similar tools to generate content for assignments will therefore be considered plagiarism and will carry similar penalties. Right, there's more information here. You can read the section regarding AI and false authorship in the university's quality manual. False authorship also occurs where a student has engaged with computer-aided software to complete an assignment in whole or part, except in cases where this has been permitted by an explicit instruction by the school and or as part of that assessment. This engagement can be the use of AI, text-generating software like ChatGPT, and so on. The submission of work that is generated and are improved by unpermitted language model software for the purpose of gaining marks will be regarded as false authorship and seen as an attempt to gain an unpermitted academic advantage. So that's the official university policy, and you can read more about it if you Google that policy, right? Accidental plagiarism often occurs when people cut and paste bits of text from sources and forget to attribute them, right? The routine advice is to cut and paste straight into a quotation mark so at least it's clear that the text is quoted from somewhere else. So in summary, this lecture talks about making use of the material that you find in the literature using direct quotes plus citations, right, as part of your research, using summaries of previous research combined with citations, getting diagrams, using diagrams and citing where you got those from, Same with software libraries and technologies. And we also mention when you don't need to provide a citation. And you'll see, you'll have practice with how to put a citation in the bibliography in the coursework 3. We also discuss how to avoid plagiarism, right? And I just want to emphasize too that the more citations that you have, the better actually. When I'm writing a paper, I try to insert as many citations as possible. If they have to be relevant, right? But the more I have, the better it looks, right? And by the way, academics, I just want to mention academics have a lot of experience detecting plagiarism. Academics are really, really good at looking at something and being able to judge whether it's plagiarized or not. Even with AI tools, it's hard to describe that ability. It's hard to articulate why we're so good at it and how we got so good at it and exactly how it works. But I'll just tell you that when I see an image, I know within a few seconds if it's plagiarized or not, right? I just know. And same when I'm reading text, I know in a few seconds if it's plagiarized or not. It's very difficult to describe this skill, like how this skill develops, like when you get it. But the longer you've been working in the business, the better you are at spotting plagiarism. So just as a little kind of heads up, right? By the way, we will be handing out a module evaluation, right, and adding it to Moodle. There is a link there already on Moodle to the module evaluation. Student evaluation of module survey. So it would be great if everybody could fill that out, right? If somebody could test it out and see if it's just working, that would be really, really great. And also, like, if you want to stay in touch, I like to stay in touch with all the students that take my classes. So I have a LinkedIn profile, and if you'd like to stay in touch, maybe you want to give a guest lecture at some point, or maybe you want to collaborate on some project. I do collaborate with alumni, right? I went to one of my former students' weddings last year. We still collaborate, and I still collaborate with people that have graduated. So if you want to stay in touch. I also have a plagiarism story, if anybody's interested. Anybody interested in a plagiarism story? So I have multiple plagiarism stories, but I think I'll only tell this one. So you know that when we publish papers, so imagine we work on a project, we write it up, and we want to publish it. It has to go through this peer review process, right? So we write a research paper, maybe it's 10 pages long. You've all seen research papers now, you're very familiar with them. You're familiar with the peer review process. That means it gets submitted to a conference or a journal. Usually it's anonymous, so you take away your names. You take your names away so that the people reviewing can't see exactly who it is. And it's the same the other way around. When you submit a paper, you don't know who the reviewers are. They're anonymized, right? So it's called double-blind reviewing, right? And all the research papers go through this process. They get submitted, usually anonymized, not always, usually anonymized, but the reviewers are always anonymized, right? Because you want to be able to express your opinion, your honest opinion, right, without getting in trouble. So I review a lot of papers. I think this is probably another reason why we're so good at plagiarism, detecting plagiarism. It's because academics that are research active they review a lot of papers, right? They'll participate in a conference. The conference organizers will say, hey, we have this paper. Can you please help us and review it? Right? Same thing with journal papers. So I get requests almost every day, and I'm not even joking, approximately every day to review papers, right? So I can't review all the ones, right, that I get requests for. It's not possible because I can't do it every single day. But this is part of the reason that academics get so good at detecting plagiarism, because they have this reviewer, they have this reviewer skill, right, that they have to exercise very, very frequently. So I had a paper once that I was reading, and it was a survey paper, so a literature review paper submitted to a conference, right, on the topic of flow visualization, because that's what my specialty is, visualization, right? I get a lot of papers on visualization. And I start to read it. And I don't know what page I was on. I get to page 5 or 6 or something, and I'm reading the text, and I'm like looking at the text, and keeping in mind this paper was written by academics with a very high and scientific level of writing. You know, so this isn't a student. These aren't students anymore. These are scientists writing. So their language level is higher, right? It's more technical, it's more authoritative, it's more professional, because they've had so many years of practice, right? Anyways, I'm reading this, and I get to whatever page it was, page 4 or something, and then I'm looking at the words thinking, gosh, that text looks really, really familiar to me. And I read it more, and I'm like, this can't be true. Like, I feel like I've seen this text before somewhere. I just, like, but this can't be true, because, like, a professional would never do this, right? A student, we're used to students doing this, like trying to plagiarize and stuff like that, but we're not used to other academics trying to plagiarizing and using other people's text. Anyways, I was reading the paper, and I'm like, this text looks really, really familiar. I think I've seen it somewhere before. And then I was just thinking, like, where have I seen this before? And then I started to realize, is it really true? Is this really possible? Could this be my own text, like the words that I wrote some years ago? And it turns out that's exactly what it was. The authors had taken one of my research papers, copied and pasted a page from one of my own research papers, inserted into theirs, and then submitted it, and I got it for review. And of course they got caught, which is quite a surprise. Very, very unusual story. That doesn't usually happen, but it did happen once, and it was very, very shocking. And I'm just happy that I was able to recognize my own. But I was really shocked. Right? I was really, really shocked. Yeah, it doesn't happen. Very, very unusual thing to happen. And I would never expect that to happen again. Yeah. Okay, any questions on plagiarism and citations or anything like that? Everybody has an understanding of those topics? Okay, if everybody's happy, then we will stop here. We'll finish here, and you can ask questions about the courseworks afterwards. If you're unhappy, you can stay and talk to me until you're happy. Yeah. Good.